We knew there was nothing going on, and he's probably not busy. We thought we'd see if Chairman Adam Schiff would like to talk to us this morning. Hi, Chairman.
Hey, Stephanie, how are you?
Oh, boy. Well, gosh, where do we start? This is really, I guess, all of our worst nightmare, what just happened with Iran, correct? You had tweeted yesterday, today a group of us met with the president on Iran. We urged him to de-escalate tensions and avoid miscalculation. Also reminded him there's no congressional authorization for war with Iran. And yet, whatever happened last night. And because of the fact that he has no credibility, right, with our allies around the world, we're left to wonder, but it just sounds chaotic and terrifying, doesn't it?
Well, it does, that we came within 10 minutes of a strike that might have left 150 casualties, and who knows whether that would have meant another escalation leading to war. And so, yeah, it's quite shocking to learn that we came that close to a strike of that caliber with no congressional approval. But, you know, I think when we set the clock back and we look at how did we get to the position we're in today, it was all too predictable.
Yep.
We left an agreement the Iranians were complying with. It kept them from developing the bomb. They were, maintaining the, compliance with its provisions. And we left. We imposed sanctions. We tried to get the Europeans to leave and impose sanctions. And then we expressed shock that Iran was saying that it too might leave the agreement. And now we're in a situation of maximum pressure meets maximum resistance, and it means there's a maximum chance of miscalculation.
So Speaker Pelosi said that you were not briefed on what happened last night in this meeting?
We were not briefed on precisely what the administration was planning. It was really I think an opportunity for us to share the concerns that we had and to urge the president to de-escalate the situation, to work with our allies. One of the Iranian objectives here is to divide us from our allies, to force a split, to weaken the international coalition that's been constraining Iran. Why should we play into it is the argument that I made to the president, that we should be working with our allies. We should be trying to, yes, protect freedom of navigation in the Strait, but also make sure that we're not going to inadvertently get into a war with Iran.
How did he respond?
I would say respectfully. He listened to what each of us had to say. I think that he seemed certainly interested in knowing where the Congress was coming from, and whether that had an impact on his decision making ultimately. I don't know, but I don't want to see people jump down his throat for exercising some discretion, even if it was very late in coming, and somehow provoke him into feeling he needs to do something that could get us into a war.
Well, that's what's hard, is to know what's going to provoke him. Apparently, Fox News all day has been all over him for being weak. And, that you and I have to worry about, are we going to go to war because of something someone on Fox and Friends said is pretty terrifying. I mean,
it is.
I mean, I feel like when you said he listened to you, it's like, well, right, this is what he does. He'll listen before then it just ignores Congress entirely, right?
He certainly hasn't paid much deference to Congress, during the course of his administration. I wonder, though, in retrospect, now that we know what happened later that evening, whether he was listening to the voices of Bolton and Pompeo and egged on by what they were urging him, had approved a strike, and maybe some of the things that we said during that meeting left an impression. I can only hope that that's the case, because
I guess with him treating everything like a reality show, right? Like, oh, we'll see what happens. Oh, I mean, it just, I think.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, it's so terrifying, Chairman, for us to sort of to have someone so erratic with the nuclear codes that and at the same time today you had something else happen, right? Felix Sater skipped out on your on a subpoena, right? So you're going to issue a subpoena now, correct?
Yes, we had a interview with him scheduled for this morning, and he didn't. He was a no-show, so he'll be subpoenaed. We are doing a deep dive into this, really lucrative deal the president was trying to consummate during the campaign and trying to conceal from the public, something that went on up until the middle of the campaign, and in which the president sought to get the help of the Kremlin. And some of the things that Sater can tell us about is who are the Russians on the other end of the transaction, and he can help us drill down into to what degree the Kremlin was aware and involved, and this might be leverage for the Kremlin. The most telling thing for me of all of this whole Moscow Trump Tower chapter is when it was discovered that the president had misled the country about all this, and they had sought the Kremlin help, and the deal went on far longer than they had said, and emails were revealed that they had sought help from Dmitry Peskov. At that point, a year after the fact, Peskov issues a statement saying that he completely ignored that outreach. The Kremlin never responded. Well, that was a lie. And so here you have the Kremlin participating and helping the President of the United States cover up what he had been doing, which is just astounding. And you can imagine how compromising that is when you've got the Kremlin running interference for you.
Yeah. Chairman, what was your take on Hope Hicks yesterday? Obviously, as many legal experts have said, what is this absolute immunity? Is that what they called it? Something that's just not a thing, right, legally?
You're right. It is not a thing. And it's also not a surprise because this is what they've been doing. They're forcing us to litigate everything in an effort to stall everything. And we are taking it to court, and we have been winning in court. And the good news is we've been getting the courts to accelerate the timetable, and they've been, rendering quick judgment. It's still too slow for all of us, but this is the drill the administration is forcing us to go through.
Well, yeah, you may know from knowing me that you are a cooler head than I am. But I am in the impeach 2 years ago caucus. But Chairman, this just, I guess I know I saw one legal analyst said that, Gerald Nadler said in some ways he welcomed what happened yesterday because it makes a stronger court case, to move forward. Obviously, there are a lot of us that, and we're up to about 70% of Democrats want impeachment now. I know you're Representative Schakowsky, Representative Kasten, Representative Porter have all come out this week in favor of impeachment. Where are you? I know you have said on record, you've said you're not there yet, but he may get you there. To those of us lay people, this just, obviously I've had Lawrence Tribe and everybody on this show that just, you've heard the case for impeachment, right? And just wonder where you're at.
Yeah, no, I have heard the case, and believe me, I find those who are urging that this is the strongest form of censure that we could bring, that argument certainly resonates with me because I don't think there's anyone feels more strongly than I do that this president should be censured for everything that he's been doing and that he's committed high crimes and misdemeanors. But I think people need to understand that this is not a panacea to initiate an impeachment proceeding that we know will lead to an acquittal in the Senate. There's an expectation, I think, that if we said tomorrow that we're now going to conduct the same kind of oversight, but we're going to call it impeachment, that all of a sudden witnesses start showing up. Don McGahn says, okay, just let me know when to come in. And the Justice Department opens its files and says, okay, have at it. None of that is going to happen. We are still going to go to court. We're still going to have to litigate this. The administration is still going to fight us. If anything, they may dig in even further. So we may go down that road, and right. I may ultimately support going down that road, but people do need to be understanding that if they're expecting it to dramatically change things, that's not a realistic expectation.
But so the legal experts that, at least I've had on, Chairman, in all deference to you, because you are also obviously a legal expert, but obviously some have argued that it expedites things, that it gives you more strength, that it is an actual impeachment inquiry in terms of the, not just the power, but the speed of getting what you need. What is your response to that?
I don't see how it expedites matters because let's say we announce tomorrow we're impeaching the president or we've begun an impeachment inquiry. Does that mean that Don McGahn comes in any quicker? I don't think it does. I don't see how that announcement changes that It does mean that on one issue, when we get to court, we have a somewhat stronger argument, and that's over grand jury material, because there's a grand jury exception that says you can get grand jury material as part of a judicial proceeding, and an impeachment is a judicial proceeding. But that same exception says, or preliminary to a judicial proceeding, and we are already preliminary to a judicial proceeding.
Right.
So we should be entitled to that when we get to court anyway. I suppose the argument that this somehow increases the speed in which we get documents presupposes that a court rules against us and says you're not preliminary. We're not going to interpret what you're doing as preliminary to an impeachment, and therefore we have to then begin an impeachment, and the court says, okay, now we'll order it. But, that doesn't seem like the most powerful argument.
Right.
I think, frankly, the most powerful argument, for us to do it or not to do it is the message it will send to a future generation or future president or future Congress. What does it mean that you do impeach or you don't impeach? And here the catch is that, yes, it's a terrible precedent if a president who behaves this way is not impeached in the House, but it may be even a worse precedent if he's acquitted on these charges by the Senate, and you have an adjudication that this is not impeachable.
Right. Respectfully, Chairman Schiff, I would say that we don't know that. That we are way past the numbers that they had before they even began the Nixon impeachment. And I think once what you and I both know is in the Mullah report, which only 3% of the American people have read, once you put that on TV in televised hearings and the American people see, I don't know that we can prejudge what will happen in the Senate. If his numbers continue to plummet, and he's going to pull down the whole Republican Party, and it becomes clear to the American people. I'm just saying, I feel like we're prejudging the outcome before we put on the case.
That's, I think, theoretically possible, although, if we have those same witnesses on today and you see that same great movement in public opinion, you can initiate the impeachment at any time.
Yeah.
But I have to say, Stephanie, after seeing act after act by the president and statement after statement that is so abhorrent by the president, and seeing the Republicans do absolutely nothing, see them cower with even the idea of a hostile presidential tweet or angry words by Sean Hannity, I've seen no evidence to indicate that they're suddenly going to find conscience.
I agree with you. I don't think they'll do it because it's the right thing. I think they'll do it because they might have to politically. But let me ask you a couple, because I'll never have enough time with you. But Speaker Pelosi says she's going to look at the less redacted version of the Mueller report. Has she done that yet? Have you done that? And what is your take on that?
I'll let the speaker speak for herself. I have begun to go through the much less redacted version of the report. So the version of the report that I have access to is one that redacts only the grand jury material. So I've begun to review that report.
It's pretty bad, isn't it? It's the part where I try to squeeze classified information out of him.
Usually my colleagues ask me to blink if certain things they assume are true, and then they stare at me until I can't help but blink. But,
you have said
we can't do that at this distance.
You have said you will subpoena Mueller if necessary, that August is too late. Where are you with that?
We're reaching a critical point here. And, quite obviously he does not want to come and testify, but also quite obviously we need him to. And, I think we're at the point now where we need an answer. Are you going to do it or you're not going to do it? And if he's not going to come in voluntarily, he's going to need to be subpoenaed. It's just too important to the public understanding that he come before Congress and the American people and not only explain his report, but also answer questions that go beyond the four corners of that report.
Two more quick questions. How do you get the full unredacted Mueller report, the underlying grand jury material that you were entitled to eons ago? How do we achieve that?
There are two ways. The Judiciary Committee in court will seek to use the exception that we talked about that's preliminary to or as part of a judicial proceeding. So they will seek court authority to do that. In the Intel Committee, we're also seeking authority under a separate section that doesn't require us to get court permission, and that is that the intelligence agencies are authorized to share with us any counterintelligence or foreign intelligence information, which is basically all of Volume 1. So,
do you have an answer yet to whether the counterintelligence thing is closed, and why are you not getting any information on that, on whether it is closed and what the results were or are?
We are now starting to get answers to those questions. And, unfortunately, we've seen time after time that we have to threaten subpoena or actually issue subpoenas to get answers, but we are starting to get answers now from the FBI. I can't go into them at this point, but we are at least starting to get answers to those questions.
Thank you for the legislation you put forward that I know you never thought you would have to put forward, saying you cannot take help from a hostile foreign power. So you have a bill. It's called the Prohibiting Foreign Election Assistance Act, because it is incredible that this is already illegal, but apparently those were the loopholes that allowed Don Jr. to escape because, right? So tell us about that quickly.
Well, and yes, and this was, I think, one of the weaker sections of the Mullah report. The analysis of that meeting in Trump Tower that Kushner and Don Jr. and Manafort had with this Russian delegation offering dirt on Hillary Clinton. And that is, you had the Russians offering this dirt. You had Don Jr. accept that offer, and Mueller acknowledges that. You had an overt act in furtherance of that conspiracy, this whole meeting in Trump Tower. That generally would be enough to charge them. And Mueller, I think, bends over backwards to say, well, we couldn't prove willful intent, intent to violate the law.
Insane.
And he says, among other things in the report, that there was no effort to conceal the meeting. That's not true, though. There was an effort to conceal it. In fact, they didn't want to discuss this with Rona, the president's secretary, because it was so highly sensitive. And they didn't obviously advertise they were meeting in Trump Tower. They lied about it afterwards. And the report goes on to say, and this is just flatly wrong, that none of the participants in the false statements a year later had also participated in the meeting, but Don Jr. participated as well.
I know. Mr. Chairman, I'm with you. We're out of time. I'm so sorry. I wish I could have you for the whole hour, but thank you. I have I stand with Schiff. You might think it's okay. I don't T-shirt that is currently made. I just want to leave you with one thing that I think what I'm afraid of is depressing the Democratic base if we don't impeach. I think that we're up to 70% of Democrats want to impeach. Most of the, presidential candidates are coming out in favor. I'm afraid of there being a split in our party. If you could just urge your colleagues and just try I'm giving you what I have from like my listeners. Yeah. I feel like the two sets of rules where they put Susan McDougal in jail for 18 months and they see these people just, skipping, right? Like defying subpoenas, not showing up behind closed doors. I know that you're too fair and too honest a man to fight dirty, but I feel like there is such a desire in the Democratic base that we fight harder, that we fight fire with fire. And so I thank you for being in the trenches every day.
Stephanie, if I can mention one last thing about this. When Donald Trump is voted out of office, the Justice Department is going to need to consider whether to prosecute the former president.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I do think one of the things that they will consider, it won't be binding, but they will consider is if he's had a trial and been acquitted in the Senate, that will be a factor I think they'll consider in deciding potentially against indictment. And so those that want to see the ultimate justice of a prosecution should also keep that in mind.
That's what Speaker Pelosi meant. All right. Well, I disagree. I think everyone knows that Mitch McConnell is a complicit jerk. But okay, listen, we're out of time. And we adore you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
You too. All right, there he goes. Chairman Adam Schiff.